Today we're going to look at solving some quadratic equations, but these are ones that are a little bit trickier because they're not given to us in the bracket form. So what we will need to do with these is we'll need to first factorize some of these using all those skills that we've learned in our previous chapter. So here's a set of examples that we're going to work through. So for each of these, we need to first factorize the equations, and then we need to solve. Okay, so it's a two-part question. So when we're looking at the first question, 6p squared minus 9p equals to 0, there's only two terms there, so it's not a trinomial. But what you will notice is that there are common factors. So we're going to take out any common factors. 6 and 9 both go into 3, so we can put 3 there. P squared and p both have p as a common factor. And then what we've got left is 2p minus 3, and that's equal to 0. Make sure you don't forget to put that 0 back in, okay, because each of the lines should be the same, except we're starting to do a bit more work with them. Now that we're in this format, this one looks very similar to the first example that we did last lesson. So we've got 3p equals to 0, or 2p minus 3 is 0. So we've got 3p equals 0, or 2p minus 3 is 0. So then p must equal to 0, so therefore p is 0, or if I move this one, I think it's a similar bracket to last time. Add the 3 over, divide by 2, or p is equal to 3 over 2. So that's the two solutions that you can get that will satisfy this equation here. So if I put in 0, you can see 6 times 0 is 0, minus 9 times 0, still 0, so it's equal to 0. If we put in 3 over 2, what we'll find is these two values should be equal to each other, so again it's going to equal to 0. In question B, we've got terms on both sides of the equal sign. When we're looking at these questions, the first thing that we should do is change it into standard form. Remember, we talked about that last time. The reason being is if you just look at this and you do normal division, you're actually going to lose some solutions. So we're going to move this 8 over to the left-hand side first. So 2x squared minus 8x equals 0. We're going to then factorize this. So 2 and 8 both go into 2, and then we've got an x. And then our bracket, what we've got left is x and 4. So looking at that, you can now see you've got a term multiplied by another term. So then we've got 2x equals 0, or x minus 4 equals to 0. So then your solution is x equals 0, or x is equal to 4. So those are your possible solutions. Question C, we now have a trinomial. So when we're working with trinomial, we're going to use SPF. Hopefully we're pretty well versed in this now, SPF. So what we want is two numbers that add to give -1, and they multiply to give -56. Now with 56, it's 7 and 8, so then it needs to be a -8 and a +7. So just have a quick look. Do those two numbers work with that sum and product? Now remember, this one's a monic trinomial, so we can use a shortcut. So we can just go m minus 8, m plus 7 equals to 0, and you can see we're multiplying two brackets together. So now we've got m minus 8 equals 0, or m plus 7 equals to 0. So then your solution, if m minus 8 is 0, then m is equal to +8, or m is equal to -7. Those are your two solutions. In question D, we've got two terms, but it is still quadratic. If we look at these two terms, we can see there's a common factor. So that's always going to be our first step. So take out 7 as a common factor, and we've got x squared minus 4 equals 0 remaining. Now, you might look at this and go, well, there's no other common factors, but there is actually a way of factorizing this. If you remember your difference of squares. So, let's leave the 7 there. Now, we can see x is squared already, and 4 is 2 squared. So that means we can write our brackets as x plus 2 and x minus 2 equals to 0. Now, when we've got a 7 out the front here, if we're multiplying it, then we've got 3 things multiplied by each other, and it needs to equal to 0. So what this means is either the 7 is equal to 0, x plus 2 is equal to 0, or x minus 2 is equal to 0. Now, obviously, 7 will never equal to 0. So if we've got a constant in the front, we can actually just ignore it. Okay, we don't need to do any solving with it. So what we're down to is we've got x plus 2 equals 0, or we've got x minus 2 equals to 0. And when we go to solve these linear equations now, x is negative 2, or x is positive 2. And those are your two solutions. So that 7 in the front won't make any difference to the solution. All right, let's keep going. With our next question, you might notice we've got the equals in the middle here. So the first thing that we need to do is change it into standard form. So what we're going to do is we're going to move that 7y inside, and we're also going to move the 5 as well. So before you even think about doing anything else, first thing, change to standard form. So 6y squared plus 7y minus 5 is equal to 0. You can see it's a trinomial. If we look at each of those terms, no common factors. So we're going to use SPF, and it's non-monic. So SPF, we want two numbers that add to give 7, which is in the middle, and they need to multiply to give the product of that. So 6 times negative 5 is minus 30. So we need to work out what two numbers are going to work for this combination, and the numbers that are going to work will be positive 10 and negative 3. So just have a quick look at that. 10 minus 3 is 7. 10 times negative 3 is negative 30. Now remember, when we're looking at non-monic trinomials, we need to take that middle term and we're going to split it using our factors. So 6y squared plus 10y minus 3y minus 5 equals to 0. What we're then going to do is group them in pairs. So first 2, second 2. So in the first two numbers, we've got 2y as a common factor, and we've got 3y plus 5 left over. If you look at the second pair, they're both negative, so we're going to take out a negative 1, and it's 3y plus 5 again, equals 0. We can now see the two brackets are common, so I'm going to write the bracket, 3y plus 5, and then everything left over goes in the other bracket. So that's 2y minus 1 equals 0. All right, so from here, now that we've got the product, okay, either this one is equal to 0 or this one's equal to 0. So we've got 3y plus 5 equals 0, or 2y minus 1 equals to 0. Now hopefully you're okay with solving these linear equations now. Y is equal to negative 5 over 3, or y is equal to positive 1/2. That's your solution. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. This one's already in standard form. So we're going to write out our SPF. So again, no common factors, so we can't factorize this one. Now we want two numbers that add to give negative 1, and they multiply to give that product, which is negative 30. So the two numbers must be negative 6 and positive 5. So then 2x squared minus 6x plus 5x minus 15 equals 0. So what we did was we split that into those two components using the factors. Now we're going to group in pairs. So in the first pair, 2x is a common factor, and we've got x minus 3 left. Second pair, 5 is a common factor, x minus 3 left over. So we can see x minus 3, 2x plus 5 equals to 0. So once we're down to here, we can now solve, we can split it. So either x minus 3 equals 0 or 2x plus 5 equals 0. And when we solve these linear equations, therefore, x equals to positive 3 or x equals to minus 5 over 2. Okay, so again, you've got two solutions. Question G, this one's one that's not in standard form at the moment, and it looks really complicated. So what we've got is a bracket, so something here, and then we've got the 28 on the other side. So if you recall back to what we did in our last lesson when changing things into standard form, what we'll need to do with this is expand that out and then move the 28 back in. So when we expand, p squared minus 3p equals to 28. Then we're going to subtract 28 back in. So p squared minus 3p minus 28 equals to 0. So always we need to be starting in standard form. So we're going to SPF this. SPF. So we want two numbers that add to give negative 3 and multiply to give negative 28. Now those two numbers should be negative 7 and positive 4. And because this one is monic, okay, there's a 1 in the front there, we can use our shortcuts. So p minus 7, p plus 4 equals to 0. So then either p minus 7 equals 0 or p plus 4 equals 0. So when we solve these equations, p is 7 or p is equal to negative 4. So those are the two possible solutions. So what we're doing here actually covers exercise 10b and 10c. Okay, so make sure you work through all of those red questions first, and when you've got a bit of time, you can have a go at those harder questions as well.